So I'll get straight to the point. My mother-in-law and I don't have a good relationship. We've never had one since mother-in-law has always been rude to me right from the start. Now, I know you must be thinking that the reason she is this way is maybe because she's overprotective about her son, right? Well, no. She is this way because she doesn't like the fact that I'm a good wife to her son. For context, my husband Rick had a very rough childhood with my mother-in-law. You see, mother-in-law is the sort of woman who never believed in marriage, so she would constantly be dating random men. Even if she did get married twice, both of her marriages ended up as complete disasters. Rick is her oldest child from her very first marriage. He has told me that his parents were extremely toxic together and would sometimes even have physical fights between them, which Rick has unfortunately witnessed. Mother-in-law has always been an alcoholic, so she would sometimes go for hours drinking while forgetting to feed Rick. His biological dad was no better. As a result, Rick was forced from a very young age to step up and take care of himself. When his dad left his mom, mother-in-law started using drugs, so Rick would have to take care of her as well, so she would not end up dead somewhere in the streets. When it was time for him to go to college, he had enough of my mother-in-law, so he immediately moved out to his dorm so he could have a new beginning. Mother-in-law would try to guilt-trip him by saying how he abandoned her. She would also force him to give her part of his monthly wages, which he would earn from his part-time jobs. Rick felt guilty about the only parent he had left, so he would give in to her demands. In his third year of college, mother-in-law married again and had a daughter named Susan. Rick knew the kind of mother she was, so he was always gentle and kind to his stepsister. It's impressive how close both Rick and Susan are even today. Once mother-in-law married again, she stopped asking him for everything since she then had a husband to fulfill her needs, and got busy with raising Susan. When Rick joined his first job at our company, he met me. I'm a year older than him and I'm his senior at work. I have to say that from our very first meeting, I noticed how attractive he was, but being a working professional, I never thought about crossing the line. It was only 8 months later when Rick finally confessed how he had always had a crush on me that we finally decided to go out on our first date. Once we knew that this was what we wanted and were serious about each other, we disclosed our relationship to HR. Fortunately, our company doesn't have any strict policies against coworkers dating as long as it is reported beforehand. Rick has always told me that my coming into his life has changed him for the better. I don't know how true this holds, but I do have to say that after I came into his life, I started to notice how much control his mother had on his life. She would waste no opportunity to gaslight him and try to paint herself as this innocent victim. Every time she and Rick had a disagreement, she would put him down by remarking how he was exactly like his father. This would hurt Rick, since his dad had abandoned them and it was very painful for him to relive it. But when I came into his life, I encouraged him to have a healthy space from her so she would not be able to affect him so much. Since we have come into a relationship, I have noticed a positive change in Rick. He has stronger boundaries now with my mother-in-law. Now, Rick is the sort of man who loves bragging about his partner, me, even though I sometimes might get embarrassed, and is very open when it comes to complimenting me. It's one of his best qualities, which I absolutely adore. Whenever Rick and my mother-in-law talked, he would tell her how he loves being with me and how good I take care of him. I guess this is how mother-in-law first started resenting me, because Rick would always tell her how his life is so much better now with me in it and how he has never been this happier. Mother-in-law would then try to gaslight him and say how she sacrificed so much for him, but Rick would retort that it was him who sacrificed his childhood taking care of her while she would drink and do drugs. Mother-in-law hated hearing this, since according to her, past should remain in the past, and would then scold Rick for bringing this up. One night when Rick and I were living together, mother-in-law showed up at our doorstep in the middle of the night crying about how she couldn't live with her husband anymore. It turns out mother-in-law cheated on her husband with a complete stranger at a bar. When this stranger found out that she was married, he promptly found mother-in-law's husband through Facebook and sent him a message apologizing for sleeping with his wife and how he had no idea about it. Understandably, her husband was furious and confronted her about it, but she refused to apologize, saying that it was just a one-time mistake and that if he was a real man, he should forgive her for it and try to fight for their relationship. Fortunately for the husband, he was done being manipulated by her and promptly kicked her out. This is why she showed up at our doorstep begging Rick for help. Rick told her how this was all her fault and she needed to apologize to her husband immediately. But mother-in-law kept refusing, saying how she didn't need a guy like him and that she had Rick to take care of him. I rolled my eyes hearing this, since this was always her excuse. She would mess up and expect her son to take care of it. But things were different. I was living with Rick, so I told him privately that his mother could not stay with us for long and that she needed to find her own accommodations, since I couldn't deal with her drama. Thankfully, Rick agreed, and after we let her stay for a week, during which mother-in-law did absolutely nothing around the house. She would leave her dirty dishes on the counter or the sink and her dirty laundry on her bedroom floor, expecting me to clean up after her. She would demand that I cook her favorite meals only, and on days when I was too tired to cook, she would taunt me about how bad of a partner I was for ordering takeout, and that her son deserved much better than this. I would keep quiet, since this was her first time staying with us and I was trying my best to be mature. I once also discovered that she had been smoking in our kitchen, since she left her cigarette butt on the floor for me to clean up. Living with her was a nightmare, and as soon as a week passed, I talked with Rick about asking her to leave. He sat her down and calmly tried to talk to her about it, but hearing this, mother-in-law erupted in anger. She started saying how he was being insensitive and that as his mother he should take care of her as long as she needed without any question. She continued to say that she had every right to stay at our place and that he was being disrespectful by asking her to leave. I scoffed when hearing her words and told her that she was wrong and that this was our place, which both me and Rick were paying for, so she had absolutely no rights to anything here without my permission. I continued telling her how we had been more than welcoming to her for a week, but she had done nothing to make it easier on us, and now it was time for her to give us our own space. Rick agreed to my words and added how she should probably try to apologize to her husband, or maybe go live with her sister. This is when mother-in-law erupted in anger, screaming at Rick about how dare I talk to her this way, and that this was not my business, so I should just keep my mouth shut. Now, I'm not a woman who takes shit from anyone, so I calmly told her that her time of trying to control and manipulate everyone was done, and that we didn't appreciate her trying to bring her drama into our place, so she needed to leave immediately. Her eyes widened in shock hearing this, but Rick interjected, saying how she should never speak to me this way ever again, since I was his equal partner, and he didn't appreciate anyone talking to me this way, when I had taken care of her this whole week. He told her how lucky he was to have me in his life and that I took care of him more than she ever did in her entire life. Mother-in-law did not like hearing this and started yelling back, saying how she had done the best for him and that he should be grateful to her for the life he has now and should allow her to live with us. But Rick was in no mood to listen further. Ultimately, she had to pack up and leave the very next day. We found out later that she went to live with Susan. This incident just made our relationship even worse, but I have never regretted standing up to her. Anyway, I guess this is why she has always been competitive with me and has continued to resent me. When Rick and I got married, she warned him, saying that he would regret getting married to a woman like me and that he needed to marry a more homely wife who could take care of his house. I laughed, hearing this irony coming from her when she was far from being a homely wife herself. She didn't attend our wedding in protest, but honestly, no one cared. We all had the best time of our lives. Now, coming on to the incident at hand, I'm 3 months pregnant. Rick and I had not informed this to anyone since I have had a miscarriage before. This second pregnancy has taken a long time, so we were extra careful and didn't want to inform people beforehand. Now that we are out of the danger zone, we felt it was appropriate for us to inform our loved ones. We wanted to surprise everyone, so we had called up everyone at an intimate gathering at our place. Rick wanted his mother to be present, and I agreed, since regardless of our relationship, I wanted our child to be loved by everyone. When people started arriving, they would notice my belly and would take a moment to process before exclaiming in happiness. Everyone was so happy for us and were excitedly asking us if we had come up with baby names. When the doorbell rang and mother-in-law arrived, I was shocked to see her walking inside arm in arm with a new man. I looked at Rick and he looked equally shocked. She then introduced him to everyone, saying this was her fiancé and that she was getting married in a few months. My mouth dropped open as I couldn't believe how unbelievably entitled she was to not even inform us about her new partner, yet to come to our place and make the announcement. Irritated, I looked at Rick and he was pissed as well, but we didn't want to ruin this moment, so we politely congratulated her. As I walked up to shake her hand and introduce myself to her new fiancé, mother-in-law suddenly spotted my belly. I watched her smile falter as she looked from me to Rick angrily. She then asked loudly if I was pregnant, and I nodded. Everyone around us started exclaiming how we all had such wonderful news that we had given. I glanced at mother-in-law and she was red in her face. She looked at Rick and asked him why he hadn't informed her before, but Rick joked, saying that she hadn't informed us about her fiancé either. Mother-in-law then started to say how, as his mother, she needed to be the first one to know about her future grandson. I interjected and calmly explained to her that we didn't want to jump the gun and spread the news until we were sure that we were out of any potential risks. I reminded her how our last miscarriage had taught us to be careful and that we had called everyone today to our place so we could celebrate this news together. But mother-in-law was not satisfied with the response. She told me that she was getting married in 6 months, which would also be the time I would be giving birth. I told her that she should be happy to have a grandchild in the same month that she would be married, but mother-in-law looked pissed. She retorted that she was still too young to be a grandmother and that she would have appreciated us giving her a heads up, since now she will have to speed up her wedding process, as she didn't want anyone to call her a granny on her wedding day. Her reasoning sounded absurd, and I couldn't help but roll my eyes at her misplaced priorities. I calmly reminded her that the focus should be on celebrating the new additions to our lives, both the upcoming wedding and the impending arrival of our child, rather than worrying about what people might say. But mother-in-law, like a child, decided to blatantly ignore me as if I didn't exist and walked away to talk to other guests. I shook my head, since I knew her quite well by now, and her immatureness was not astonishing to me anymore. Rick and I decided to let it go and got busy with our friends. When Susan arrived, she greeted us warmly and congratulated us on our pregnancy. Rick asked her if she knew that their mother was engaged again, but she looked just as surprised as us and told him that she never told her anything about a new man. She joked that they should not be surprised by her, since clearly mother-in-law changes her man like the weather. When it was time to serve lunch, I got up to bring the food out, but Rick and my parents urged me to remain seated, telling me that I should not even lift a finger, and that they would serve everyone. My mother-in-law must have overheard them and was probably trying to act nice in front of everyone or impress her new fiancé, because she interjected, saying that she would help out by bringing me a plate so that I wouldn't have to lift a finger. I smiled politely, not knowing how to react, since just a minute ago she was blatantly ignoring me and now she wanted to bring me my food. She had never been nice to me, so I couldn't imagine why she was suddenly trying to act all nice to me. As we all sat down at the table to have our meal, mother-in-law came and handed me a plate. She announced loudly that she had chosen more vegetables rather than meat, so her future grandbaby would be strong and healthy. I didn't mind the vegetables since she was more of a vegetarian herself, and everyone around me oohed and awed, saying how well she was taking care of me, but I knew her better. This was completely uncharacteristic of her to bring me a plate. I looked at the food suspiciously, trying to see if she had done anything to my food, but it looked completely normal. Mother-in-law brought out her plate and then went back to the kitchen to get herself a plate, which was quite unusual for her. Unbeknownst to people around me, I surreptitiously exchanged plates, since she had brought a lot of vegetables as well, and hoped that she would not notice. I thought no one had caught me, but I caught her fiancé sitting next to her looking at me, but he didn't say anything, so I prayed that he would not tell her anything either. Before she could come back, I started gobbling on my food so she would be less suspicious about what I had done. I watched her sit down next to me, and then she asked me if I was enjoying the food. I told her I was, and she told me that I should try out the salad that she had brought me on the plate, as apparently new mothers should have more salad. I nodded and kept eating. Mother-in-law then took a bite of her food, chewed it slowly, and immediately spat it out loudly in front of everyone. My eyes widened in shock as I saw her looking at the plate closely, while others asked her if everything was okay. This was the very plate she had given me, and I had exchanged it with hers. She took a sip of her drink but continued to cough, so she excused herself to go to the bathroom. I immediately whispered to Rick that we needed to talk, since I didn't want to make a scene in front of everyone. Worried that she intended to harm me by mixing something with my food, I told him what had happened. He looked at me incredulously when I recounted to him the entire thing, and then asked me if I was sure about this. I nodded and told him that I didn't know what she had mixed up with the food, but I did exchange her plate with mine, and he could ask his mother's fiancé about it if he wanted. Rick assured me that he was going to take care of it. I tried to stop him, saying that we could confront his mother later, but he wasn't having it. He stormed into the house immediately, and I saw him talking to his mother's fiancé. I couldn't hear their conversation, but Rick was visibly furious. His mother returned from the bathroom looking confused and concerned. She tried to approach the situation casually, but Rick cut her off. In a firm and controlled voice, he asked, "Did you do something to my wife's food?" The question hung in the air, and everyone around the table fell silent, sensing the tension. Mother-in-law stammered, denying any wrongdoing, and acted innocent. She claimed that she only wanted to make sure I had a healthy meal for the baby. Rick wasn't buying it. He warned her loudly that if she didn't confess right then and there, then he would be calling the police. Everyone looked at them, confused, since no one had an idea that I had exchanged plates, and she had eaten from the plate she had apparently given me. Mother-in-law tried to get out of it by saying how she had not done anything and it was probably our wild imagination, but I walked into the room and told everyone what had happened. My mother gasped in shock and disdain and asked me if I was okay. I nodded and turned my head to mother-in-law, who looked furious that she had been caught. With everyone staring at her and judging her for what she had done, she finally confessed that she had just mixed up large amounts of salt to my salad as a harmless prank. My eyes widened in shock, and I asked her why she would ever do something like that. And mother-in-law tried to justify, saying salt was not going to kill me or anything, and I would have probably gone and puked like she did, so it was not a big deal. Before I could even react to her callousness, Rick looked like he had lost his mind and started shouting at her that she was crazy to do something like this, and that she needed to be reported. Mother-in-law scoffed, saying that this was being blown out of proportion and that salt could never kill anyone. She continued to say how, as a new mother, I should get used to puking, so this prank was clearly not a big deal. My mother, who had never before disrespected mother-in-law, marched up to her angrily, saying, "How dare you play with my daughter's health, especially during such a special moment? You should be ashamed of yourself. How dare you jeopardize the well-being of your own grandchild? You've gone too far, and I never want to see you near my daughter again." Rick chimed in, saying that what she had done was outright crazy and that her actions were unacceptable. He asked her and her fiancé to leave immediately. Mother-in-law, realizing the severity of the situation, attempted to downplay her actions, insisting it was just a joke, but not a single person came to her support. The atmosphere was tense as Rick escorted his mother out, and I remained standing, still processing what had just happened. Our friends and family came up to me, offering me their support. Everyone's excited mood had been brought down by mother-in-law and her immature actions. Rick returned shortly, apologizing to everyone for the disruption and assuring them that we should continue to celebrate regardless of how toxic his mother was, since he was going to be a father for the first time. The mood had undoubtedly shifted, but our loved ones rallied around us, offering their support and understanding. Since that day, Rick and I have decided that we cannot allow our baby anywhere near his mother after what she has done. Clearly something is inherently wrong with her, and we can't put my life or my baby's life at risk by allowing her to disrupt our lives. Will I be the a-hole if we cut her off from our lives? Update 1. Thank you everyone for your support and comments these past 4 days. To everyone asking why are we even feeling guilty for cutting her off even after what she did, it's because Rick has never had a healthy relationship with a parent. Him and his mom clearly have a toxic relationship, but it's not always easy for a child to cut off his parents, no matter how difficult they are. But because it is now about the health of our baby, Rick seems to have made up his mind about it. I just don't want him to regret anything, which is why I wanted some unbiased opinions from everyone. He has decided to talk to her separately, as I don't have the energy to face her ever again. Hopefully things go well, and I will update you soon. Update 2. So it's been a month since my last update. Unfortunately, things have not been going well with our plan to cut off our mother-in-law. First of all, Rick went and talked with her about our decision, and they had a huge fight, which was quite expected. But after that, knowing that we don't want her in our lives, she keeps showing up at our place unannounced. She mostly does this during the weekdays, knowing that Rick would be at the office and I would be at home alone. Luckily, we already have cameras installed, so I never open the door for her. She hasn't done anything crazy, but comes around with chocolates or flowers. I never touch those things since I have paranoia now in case she has done something to them. Rick always comes back home and throws them straight into the bin. It's unsettling to live with this constant anxiety, and it has taken a toll on my mental well-being as well. We are hoping that eventually she is going to give up, since she is blocked on our phones and we don't open the door for her either. My parents have been worried for me ever since the incident, and my mother comes over and stays with me whenever she can. For now, I'm just trying my hardest to focus on this journey of becoming a mother and being as healthy as possible for my child. Update 3. Hey everyone. Thank you for everyone's continued support these last few months, and I would like to apologize for not giving an update sooner. I've been busy with my life, but I have a very important update. Remember when I wrote that mother-in-law would continue to show up to our place hoping to talk to me? Well, a few weeks ago, after repeated attempts to contact us, she left a letter in the mailbox. I opened it hesitantly, half expecting some manipulative plea or a guilt trip. To my surprise, the letter was more of a formal apology. Mother-in-law expressed regret for her past actions, acknowledging the harm she had caused. She promised to respect our decision and give us the space we needed by never contacting us again until we were ready to do so. I was shocked to read the letter, and when Rick came, I asked him to double-check if this was really his mother's handwriting, since this was quite unexpected. It turns out that she is married now, which happened way faster than expected, so probably she wants to turn over a new leaf, which I appreciate. And part of me wants to believe her sincerity. However, for the sake of our safety, we will continue to maintain our distance from her. For now, Rick and I are focused on preparing for the upcoming arrival of our child, hoping for a peaceful and stress-free environment. Stay tuned for more stories from our girl relationships.